Shuaib is asking your thoughts on Apostate Prophet's performance on the Thought Adventure podcast and his dismissive attitude to philosophy as a bunch of irrelevant rhetoric. So to be honest, I haven't seen this, so I can't give I can't give an accurate review of this particular performance. I have talked to Apostate Prophet about philosophy before, and so I can kind of harken back to that conversation. I don't know exactly what he said here. My remarks might be inaccurate, but I think he shares a somewhat similar frustration that I have with philosophy, which is I don't find it always relevant. I find it very esoteric. I find it too abstract, and it's fun. It's very interesting and important to have these conversations, but I think it doesn't always acknowledge the reality of how messy and muddy the human experience is. There are so many factors that go into meeting our biopsychosocial needs that aren't accounted for in philosophical thought. We're not these little things that can just become these little moral perfect creatures. We are driven by biochemical reactions that can go really haywire, and it's not as simple as just saying, well, this and this action is the most moral and it causes the least suffering and we should just all be doing that, because there are so many material conditions that just get in the way of actually achieving those goals. So I get very frustrated in philosophical discussions when it heads too much in that direction and isn't considering the dirty reality of our world. And at that point is when I tend to kind of tune out, because I just find it somewhat irrelevant. That doesn't mean I don't think that it is an important endeavor. It is very good to mull over these ideas, check what we're doing, reconsider our processes. But at the end of the day, you need to be more driven towards driven by the data of what is actually observed. Does that make sense, Armin?
Yeah, but I think it all depends on what you mean by philosophy. And what, we could just refer to what most people think of when they talk about philosophy. But if you want to be more general, any contemplation about anything would be philosophy. I mean, the idea of, by the way, we don't know if if AP is being represented accurately here or not. So we're just we have no, I mean, I didn't watch the listen to the podcast, right? But the idea of saying that philosophy is a bunch of irrelevant rhetoric, that's a philosophical statement, right? So, I mean, if you want to be very general about what philosophy means, just making that claim, it's also taking part in philosophy. I think the part of philosophy where a lot of people have, in my view, accurately deemed useless is the metaphysical part, right? I think that is the part of philosophy where we have come to an understanding now that it's fun sometimes to think about what is the nature of reality and how do we know it. But we have answers to those things when it comes to finding models that reflect reality. We have methods to come up with answers, usually referred to as the scientific method, where it doesn't involve people just reflecting on the world to come up with answers to those questions. You know what I mean? We have superior methods to that. However, when it comes to metaphysical questions, I think we have to retire philosophy. But does that mean that we have to get rid of philosophy as a whole? That would be impossible, because at the end of the day, you have to reflect on things. So here's the thing. You could also say that when it comes to reflecting on things, we now have branches for reflection on things that are more specific to what you're reflecting on, right? So, for example, we don't need philosophers anymore, because if you're talking about psychology, we have psychologists now. When you're talking about society, we have sociologists now. When you want to talk about economy, we have economy now. When you want to talk about reality and understanding, how do we have knowledge of reality, we have science now, right? But then then we don't need the separate branch. People could say like that is philosophy, that is just there for contemplation, right? So I still do think there's some utility in looking at how people used to consider different ideas, the history of it, and even if they were wrong, why they were wrong, right? And also within these, I still think that you could have science, and then you could have the philosophy of science, right? So science could do its thing, but then the mere explanation for why we do science and why the scientific method is a superior way. Some people say you don't need the explanation because it will win because it works. That's Stephen Hawking's perspective, is like science will win because it works. You don't need to there's nothing else that you need. However, for humans, unfortunately, stuff working is not enough. You actually need to sell it to them. And to be able to explain things, to be able to reflect on why we do certain things, you do need to contemplate on it, and that will be doing philosophy. So you could have science, and you could have the philosophy of science, where it explains why the scientific method is the superior method. By the way, I explained all of these in a lot more detail in a video I recently did on my own personal channel called The Problem with Philosophy. If you search for Armin Navabi, The Problem with Philosophy, you could see all of that coming up. Some of the current uses for philosophy, I think, is to sell the scientific method, is to explain why the scientific method is a superior method, right? You also need philosophy. You need philosophical skills to be able to fight bad philosophy, right? To be able to understand why Hegel was full of crap, why Kant was full of crap, why Aristotelian way of looking at things is outdated, and why Plato was wrong. Why even Hume, who I love, was wrong. Karl Popper was definitely answer to the why we trust the scientific method was a perfect answer to the Hume's radical skepticism. So basically, to fight off bad philosophy and explain why it's wrong, you could do some philosophy. That's a good thing to do. But overall, I think if you have to choose between learning philosophy or learning a more new, superior way of thinking properly, which is like the learning logical fallacies and understanding how to basically informal logic, right? Informal logic is a lot more helpful has a lot more utility in you being able to reason more properly. It doesn't give you as direct and decisive answers as the way answers as philosophers have came up with. A lot of philosophy also, by the way, if you actually know how to think properly and simplify things and look at the core of what different claims are getting at, then you also realize that a lot of history of philosophy were people just dressing up very simple nonsensical claims with very heavy, complicated words and systems, where made it seem a lot more intelligent and sophisticated than they actually were. It was just basically certain claims without evidence, but it was dressed up with this very, elaborate system and with very heavy language that made it seem very impressive. But at the end of it, when you clean out all of that mess off of it and then look at the actual claim, you look at it like, okay, well, that's ridiculous. Okay, this is your claim, do you have any reason to believe in this claim? And you realize, no, it's just people making full of crap, making claims without nothing to back it up. And just the internal consistency of it seems to be enough for them to believe that it's correct, right? But when it comes to, for example, the scientific method, like, none of it is verifiable, right? None of these claims of a lot of these philosophers in history were verifiable. The internal consistency of it means, for a lot of these philosophers, made it seem like that should be enough for you to believe that this is a good system to accept. But if you look at the scientific method, it has internal consistency and two other things that makes it a lot more easy to accept, right? So it has, like, the scientific method, the models that it comes up with when it comes to explaining the world is internally consistent, right? So that means when it's internally consistent, means the models are not contradicting each other. That means that it has explanatory power, right? But it has two other things that these other philosophers don't have, right? It has predictive power, right? It has predictive power, and it also have manipulative power. Manipulative power means that it has means the power of technology, right? So basically, what you understand is, like, because of these three things, you understand that what the scientific method is giving us must be reflecting something about reality. Not reality as it is, because that's impossible, but something about it, it is hooked into reality somehow, right? Or else we wouldn't be able to land on the moon. I mean, Stephen Hawking said it better than anyone else, like, science will win because it works, right? I mean, the fact that it works means that we have uncovered some secrets about how everything is. Anyways, I think I explained too long.
Hey guys, if you're a fan of Blasphemy and Sexy Callie, like me, then you need to be sure to subscribe to our newsletter, link in the description below. Because if you subscribe, we will send you a free copy of our Blasphemous Art ebook. And let me tell you, it is the tastiest blasphemy that you can find anywhere available today. And we are so generous with our blasphemy that we continue to send you more blasphemy every week. So make sure to subscribe, link in the description below.